In this video, we're counting down the 10 cars that nearly destroyed General Motors. Number 1. Cadillac Catera. By the mid-90s, Cadillac was in desperate need of a youth injection. Their customer base was literally dying off, and younger luxury buyers were flocking to German brands. Their solution? Import an Opel Omega from Europe, slap a Cadillac badge on it, and create one of the most bizarre marketing campaigns in automotive history. Remember Ziggy? The cartoon duck mascot that was supposed to make Cadillac cool? Those commercials featuring Cindy Crawford telling us about the caddy that zigs. The whole campaign was a cringe-worthy attempt to convince young professionals that this rebadged European sedan had the DNA of a sports car. But the Catera couldn't deliver on those promises. Its 3.0-liter V6 engine wheezed to 60 miles per hour in a yawn-inducing 8.5 seconds. Hardly the performance you'd expect from a car trying to compete with BMW. Even more shocking was what $30,000 got you in 1997. Cloth seats came standard, and they had the audacity to list an air-conditioned glove box as a premium feature. Number 2. Chevrolet Monte Carlo, 5th generation. While the Catera was busy disappointing luxury car buyers, GM was working hard to crush the spirits of muscle car fans too. Remember the legendary Monte Carlo? That iconic nameplate with its distinctive styling and rumbling V8 power that dominated American streets through the 80s before disappearing in 1988? Well, in 1995, GM decided to bring it back, but not in a way that made anyone happy. The revival shocked and horrified enthusiasts when they discovered GM had essentially slapped the Monte Carlo badge on a two-door Lumina sedan. Yes, you heard that right. They turned a muscle car legend into a front-wheel drive coupe with zero V8 options. The once distinctive curves and character lines that made the Monte Carlo stand out were replaced with a bland, rounded-off design that blended in with every other forgettable mid-90s sedan on the road. Even the sporty Z34 trim was a letdown. With its modest 3.4-liter V6 producing just 215 horsepower, it offered nothing close to the tire-smoking performance the Monte Carlo name once promised. GM executives tried to defend their decision by claiming front-wheel drive was a necessary evolution, but loyal fans weren't buying it, literally. While initial sales weren't terrible, they steadily declined as buyers realized this was nothing more than a Lumina coupe wearing a nostalgic name tag. Number 3. Geo Metro. If you thought the Monte Carlo's decline was sad, GM somehow found a way to create a vehicle that was even more embarrassing. One that weighed less than 1,800 pounds and made highway driving feel like tempting fate. The Geo Metro wasn't actually a GM design at all, but rather the result of GM partnering with Suzuki to combat fuel-efficient Japanese imports by importing fuel-efficient Japanese cars and slapping American badges on them. Let's talk about what it was like to drive this automotive punchline. With just 55 horsepower from its microscopic 3-cylinder engine, the Metro struggled to maintain highway speeds, while its paper-thin construction made every passing semi-truck a potential disaster. Drivers reported feeling like they might be blown into the next lane by a strong gust of wind or the draft from larger vehicles. Step inside, and you'd be greeted by what contemporary reviewers described as a bus station bathroom interior, featuring the cheapest plastics GM could source, uncomfortable seats, and the constant droning of an engine working at maximum capacity just to keep up with traffic. But here's the thing. Despite being the automotive equivalent of wearing a hair shirt, over 1 million Americans willingly purchase these rolling hazards. Why? That impressive 47 miles per gallon fuel economy was too tempting for budget-conscious buyers to ignore, even if it meant sacrificing basic safety features, acceleration, and any hint of driving dignity. Number 4. Geo Storm GSI. The Metro proved that GM could build an economical car if you lowered your standards enough, but what about something with a bit more excitement? Enter the Geo Storm GSI, GM's attempt to convince young drivers they could have sports car thrills without sports car bills. This rebadged Isuzu Impulse looked fast while standing perfectly still, which was convenient since that's where many of them spent their time. Despite its aggressive styling and sporty GSI badge, the Storm packed just 130 horsepower under its hood. That might not sound terrible until you realize the Honda Civic C and Nissan Sentra SER both delivered better performance while being infinitely more reliable. The Storm wasn't just outgunned, it was outclassed in every category that mattered. Owners quickly discovered the Storm's dark clouds, electrical systems that failed without warning, and transmissions that gave up the ghost well before the car was paid off. The repair bills often exceeded what the car was worth on the used market, leaving many owners underwater on both their loans and their emotions. Number 5. Geo Tracker. As the Storm faded from GM's lineup, a new weather system was brewing in the form of the Geo Tracker. GM's attempt to cash in on America's growing SUV craze without actually building a proper SUV? Imagine taking a tin can, adding 4 wheels, and calling it an off-roader. That's essentially what GM delivered with this miniature 4x4 pretender. With its paper-thin body panels and a 1.6-liter engine struggling to produce a measly 80 horsepower, the Tracker made highway driving feel like a near-death experience. Merging onto freeways required prayer, planning, and a healthy dose of blind optimism. The situation worsened for buyers who opted for the 4-wheel drive system, which added weight without adding any meaningful power to compensate. The Tracker's most impressive feature was its ability to dissolve before your eyes. These little SUVs developed rust issues around the rear wheel wells and floor pans faster than some owners could make their second car payment. What started as small orange bubbles quickly evolved into structural concerns that made Trackers unsafe within just a few years of ownership. Number 6. Buick Skylark, 6th generation. The Tracker wasn't the only GM vehicle struggling with an identity crisis in the 90s. Buick was about to take confused styling to an entirely new level. What happens when you take a respected nameplate with roots back to the 1950s and try to make it modern? The answer came in 1992 with the 6th generation Buick Skylark, featuring what can only be described as the automotive equivalent of a fashion disaster. The Skylark's front end resembled an angry duck with a bizarre protruding beak that left onlookers bewildered. GM proudly called this new age styling, but consumers had another word for it: hideous. This wasn't just subjective criticism. The design was so universally panned that potential buyers actively avoided Buick showrooms. Behind that controversial face lurked even more disappointment. While competitors were advancing their technology, Buick was recycling parts from their back catalog. The problematic 2.3-liter quad-4 engine brought its reputation for head gasket failures and persistent oil leaks to an unsuspecting new generation of drivers. Adding insult to injury, Buick paired this unreliable power plant with an outdated 3-speed automatic transmission when competitors had already moved to 4 speeds. Number 7. Chevrolet Lumina Z34. While unicorn rare Skylarks were vanishing from dealer lots, another GM model was busy confusing the American car-buying public for entirely different reasons. Ever wondered what a 210 horsepower midlife crisis looks like with 4 doors? Meet the Chevrolet Lumina Z34, the automotive equivalent of your dad trying to convince everyone he's still cool by wearing a backwards baseball cap to your school events. The regular Lumina was Chevy's honest attempt to battle the wildly successful Ford Taurus in the family sedan segment. But somewhere in GM's product planning meetings, someone had the brilliant idea to create a performance version by slapping on aggressive body cladding, tacking on a spoiler, and calling it a day. The result? A family sedan desperately trying to convince you it belonged on a racetrack. Under the hood, the Z34 packed a respectable 3.4-liter V6 engine pumping out 210 horsepower. On paper, that sounded promising until you actually drove it. Contemporary reviews consistently highlighted the car's fundamental identity crisis. All that power was paired with a chassis and suspension designed for comfortable family cruising, not corner carving performance. The disconnect between the Z34's sporty looks and its actual driving dynamics left owners feeling like they'd been sold a sports sedan that couldn't deliver on its promises. Number 8. Pontiac Grand Am N-Body Generation. If the Lumina's dashboard issues left you unimpressed, the Pontiac Grand Am took GM's plastic obsession to an entirely different universe. Under all that aggressive styling and excessive body cladding lurked what might be the perfect case study in automotive deception. A car that somehow became one of Pontiac's best sellers despite being fundamentally flawed in almost every way. The Grand Am's exterior was draped in more plastic than a toy store, with sweeping body cladding that initially gave it a sporty, futuristic appearance. The problem? That plastic didn't age gracefully. After a few years of sun exposure, owners discovered their prized Pontiacs developing a sad, faded appearance as the cladding brittled, cracked, and in many cases simply fell off during normal driving. But the real nightmare resided under the hood. The base 2.3-liter quad-4 engine transformed ordinary commutes into anxiety-inducing adventures with its tendency to leak oil from multiple locations simultaneously. Head gasket failures were so common that many owners simply kept jugs of coolant in their trunks. The timing chain issues were equally concerning, often announcing themselves with an alarming rattle before catastrophic failure. Number 9. Oldsmobile Achieva. The Grand Am at least had personality, even if it was deeply flawed. But what about a car so aggressively average that it contributed to killing off one of America's oldest car brands? The Oldsmobile Achieva wasn't just bad. It committed the unforgivable sin of being forgettable in an industry built on dreams and desires. While sharing the same troubled N-body platform as the Grand Am, the Achieva lacked any visual excitement to distract buyers from its mechanical shortcomings. Oldsmobile was desperately trying to shed its old person image, but their solution, bland styling coupled with reliability issues, turned younger buyers away in droves. The Achieva became automotive camouflage, with owners literally unable to locate their vehicles in parking lots because they blended into a sea of beige mediocrity. Oldsmobile's attempt to inject some excitement came in the form of the rare SCX performance package. This high-output quad-4 powered variant sold just 1,000 units, and even these souped-up versions couldn't generate enough enthusiasm to save the car's reputation. The SCX was like putting racing stripes on a refrigerator. The performance parts couldn't overcome the fundamental blandness of the base product. Number 10. Chevrolet Cavalier Base Model. If the Achieva killed Oldsmobile through sheer blandness, the Chevrolet Cavalier committed a far greater sin. It actively taught Americans to distrust domestic cars entirely. While selling in massive numbers as GM's compact car champion, the Cavalier simultaneously pushed millions of buyers straight into the welcoming arms of Honda and Toyota. Remember your uncle who owned a Cavalier in the 90s and now buys nothing but Japanese cars? There's a heartbreaking reason for that loyalty shift. The Cavalier's crash test performance was frankly terrifying, with scores that plummeted further behind Japanese competitors with each passing year. By the late 90s, as Honda and Toyota incorporated advanced safety features, the Cavalier remained frozen in time, a relic with crash protection that belonged in a museum, not on modern highways. The 2.2-liter engine wasn't just underpowered, it was a mechanical time bomb. Head gasket failures, persistent oil leaks, and transmission problems didn't just inconvenience owners. They left them stranded on roadsides contemplating their next vehicle purchase. Spoiler alert, it wouldn't be American.